Hey guys, it's Drinking James here. So this video was kind of an unplanned video. I kind of like to figure out my video making schedule a few weeks out in advance and kind of get ideas and work that way, but some stuff happened recently in the fandom on Twitter, and I'm not going to go into specifics out of respect for the people involved, but I kind of wanted to contribute my thoughts to the conversation. And technically, while I am, at the time of uploading this video, a day late in terms of the month, you know, it's Black History Month, so I think this is a pretty good time to kind of have this conversation. And, I think really what we need to talk about here is diversity in Thomas and Friends and how it's been done right, and really more the point of the discussion is how it's been done wrong. And if you haven't been around on Twitter, there's been a lot of discussion about Nia and her involvement in the show, and whether she was good representation, bad representation, stuff about her design, stuff about her character, and it's a touchy subject in the fandom. You know, to keep it plain and simple, it just is. For those of you who live under a rock and have no idea who she is an engine from Kenya, painted orange, and she joined the Steam team in season 22, replacing Edward. And a lot of fans didn't like Nia, and I'm not going to say on record I'm like a huge Big World, Big Adventures fan or anything like that. Frankly, I detest it. And I really didn't like Nia, and I didn't like a lot of what Nia stood for, frankly, down to her design and character and usage in the show. And a lot of it is because the show kind of made this big mistake with Big World, Big Adventures. So really the story behind Big World, Big Adventures is they wanted Thomas to be more inclusive, they wanted it to fit the global goals, and they wanted it to be, you know, have, you know, more gender bias, more racial bias, and all these other things. And they made a lot of changes to the show to do that, and for lack of a better term, the choices and changes that they made felt very, for lack of a better term, forced. You know, it was not well written, it was not well conceived, it was not well thought of, it wasn't smart, it felt very bland and obvious. And look, I'm not the target audience of the show, but this is not just a problem in Thomas and Friends, this is a problem in a lot of media. Because when a lot of shows suddenly feel the need that, oh, we need to be more diverse, and they pigeonhole characters in and pigeonhole things into the show that it doesn't necessarily fit as well into, you get these weird results, and that creates resentment, and then when people have resentment, they get labeled as racist. I don't think every Thomas fan that has an issue with Nia is racist. I'm black. Like, I am a person of color. And I don't like Nia. I don't like Nia because she's not a well thought out character. She's barely a character. A lot of her character is just being African. And that's not a character. That's a culture. You can't just take a character from a culture and say your culture or your character is you're African, you're Australian, you're Chinese, you're Indian, you're Brazilian. It's like, you can't just do that. There has to be more to it. Your culture can influence your character. You know, we all have our own personal cultural influences, whether it's because of the countries that we're from, or where our families are from, or the cities we grew up in, you know, the towns and all that stuff. It helps develop our personality, right? It's our own personal reflection and reaction to what we see around us. And Nia just isn't that. I mean, when you look at Nia, she's like nice, kind of smart, and that's about all there is to her. She doesn't have like an interesting defining character trait. And then everything else is just in relation to her being the token black female character of the show. And that's all she is. That's how she's basically treated. She doesn't really get many starring episodes. She doesn't get to do anything exciting. She doesn't have any interesting character dynamics with many of the characters. And for lack of a better term, is just not written well in the show. Now, I think a lot of projects and fan works have written her nicely and understand, hey, we need to do a little bit more than just shove her into the cast. Like, we gotta do something to make her interesting, to give her a reason why she's there. You know, if you're just putting in characters to check off boxes of, you know, for lack of a better term, DEI hires, what are we doing here? You know, people can smell that, and they'll smell it a mile away. And if you're trying to influence people that, you know, inclusion is good, diversity is good. This is not the way to go about it. Too much of Nia and what she is, both in her design with her extravagant African colors and her character, is just way too different than what the rest of the show is. Not because, like, the rest of the show, for lack of a better term, is fairly white-coded because it takes place in Britain, but, you know, like, Thomas is painted, you know, he's got blue and red and, you know, a little bit of white, but he's not literally the British flag like no engine is, right? You have engines of varying colors, right? It's like, it just feels very weird to have a character just forced in, and it's so obvious why they're forced in, and they're not even done justice. I mean, it's not just Nia, it's like a lot of the Big World, Big Adventures characters. They said they wanted more female inclusion. They added a ton of female characters, and they didn't do anything with them. I mean, the only ones who really got episodes were, like, Nia, occasionally, Rebecca, and even Emily somehow got even less appearances. And it's like, I remember in season 21, they hyped up, like, Rosie was hyped up, she was in a lot of promotional marketing, it's like she's gonna have this bigger role, and they did, like, nothing with Rosie. And they had other female characters on Sodor that they did even less with. So it's like, I think what a lot of what Mattel wanted with Nia is something that they can just slap on the merchandising, slap on the marketing, and say, oh, no, we are a very inclusive show. See, this very black-coded character, you know, we're very, very smart. You know, we know what we're doing. We're not racist at all. See, here's our black friend right here. That's the same energy. And I don't think people realize that. And really, to go a little bit further with race in the show, Thomas is a very difficult show to talk about race in. Because you kind of can't. They're engines. Race is a very human-attributed thing. It's about skin color, right? The engines don't have any skin color. They're just gray faces. The show is pretty consistent with that. Or the engine or characters have embedded faces like Annie and Clarabelle. Pretty much everyone else, gray faces. Across the entire show. And it's pretty consistent. It's regardless of where they are in the world. So, how do we make Nia seem African? Oh, we'll just slap some African patterns all over her. We'll give her bigger lips, and to make sure she's female, we'll give her makeup. And it's like, yeah, now we've got this. And now it's you got something that marketing executives think like, yeah, now we're marketing towards people. And I'm sure if there was, you know, black children, especially black girls that wanted to watch Thomas to see Nia, and you watch the episodes and she's barely involved and she's not that interesting, I feel like you're kind of being cheated and lied to. It's a hard show to talk about this kind of subject with because the characters really can't easily replicate it. Now, we do have characters of various ethnicities in the show, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it's hard to kind of reflect that. The closest allegory to, like, a racial kind of paradigm is steamies versus diesel engines. You know, I saw some conversation about that, you know, in the fandom, and people saying like, you're reaching too much. I mean, if there's any metaphor to be had there, it's not exactly a one-to-one, like, this is racism, like, it's not, it's prejudice, but it's a lot more than that. But, like, that's the closest Thomas can really do it. You don't have to do things literally, right? Because if you do it literally, it's just weird. Because now you're bringing up this aspect, like, we're putting this extra emphasis, right, that Nia is different than the other Sodor engines. In a sense, we're kind of ostracizing her, and it's just a weird thing to do with her character. You compare other characters in this show, right? Like, James has his own features that stand out to him and about him. Nothing about him being British, right? Like, characters have their own prides in various things. Like, James is very proud of his paintwork. And he'll make comments about people's paintwork, but that's not really a direct racial allegory. Because engines can just change their paint color whenever they want. You know? You have, like, Gordon and Duck, who are very proud of the railways they come from. You know? But, like, that changes because those railways will come and go and change their identities and whatnot. But it's different things, right? And I just feel like with a character like Nia, they made her, in a way too human. And tried to bring a very human element into a show about mostly machines. And I think that's what kind of turned a lot of people off about it. Now, not to say that this can never be done in Thomas, it can absolutely work. And two characters I want to use as an example, Hero and Victor, they were two of the first new characters introduced when the show went to CGI. And really prior to the Big World, Big Adventures era, a lot of the characters that were introduced to the show that were international were handled fairly well. I mean, some of them were one-off characters. I mean, really with the exception of Hank, a lot of them were, you know, like, even if they were different and foreign, it wasn't like you're calling it to attention the fact that they were different and foreign. Like, they had personalities, some of which were influenced by their cultures, but their personality isn't like Hank, where his is just stereotypical American, right? Like, Hero is a gentle, wise engine. You know, he's very introverted, very passive. He doesn't like to go against authority. You know, he's very quiet, very reserved. I described Hero, a Japanese character. I could very easily create a British character with those exact same personality traits. And I think that's how the engine should be characterized. Now, Hero's reasonings for being that way are influenced by Japanese culture. And the interesting thing about Hero is they don't really directly say he's Japanese until I think season 24 when he goes back to Japan with Kenji. I don't think they really ever say it. At least I don't remember them saying it. I don't remember them saying it in Hero of the Rails. So with that, I think that's rather interesting. That, like, we all know it, right? Because we understand the culture and stuff like that, and it's heavily implied he's from Japan, but they don't outright say it. You know, Victor, you know, first character in the show to speak Spanish, and it does have some impact. They talk about his journey to Sodor, and the fact that he couldn't speak the same language, so he couldn't warn people on the ship about the chains breaking, and then he falls into the water. And then that happens, and that was a, you know, and that kind of starts his character, and then he learns the Sodor language, and he learns English, and he stays at the steamworks, and he creates a whole new life there and identity. And, you know, I really appreciate the work they put into developing his character, because now he's a cool character, and he can be a character that Hispanic children or Latino children can look upon and be very happy to see represented in their show. Now, they didn't have to give Victor a mustache and a goofy sombrero to be like, hey, this character's, you know, Hispanic. They gave him a good, you know, backstory and developed his character nicely. And there's other characters. You have Luke, who's Irish, Hugo, who's German. You've got, you know, you have a few American engines like Bash Dash and Ferdinand. Well, while they're like stereotypical Hicks, I think Misty Island Rescue itself was supposed to be more like a love letter to like old American railways and logging industry. So at least it's well researched. And it's like, even if they're hillbillies, at least it's not full on stereotype. And they have character traits beyond just being hillbillies, right? Really only Hank, like pre Big World, Big Adventures, that's a foreign character that, you know, acts differently than, you know, how you'd like him to. So I think it comes down to this, and I feel like the show didn't want to put in the work, and you see that reflected in its international episodes. You know, a lot of the international episodes are just basically summed up by country stereotypes. Oh, we're in China, so we gotta talk about pandas, or we're in Australia, so we gotta talk about the Outback, mate, and all that stuff. It's just, it's not really smart writing. There's ways you could have really done some interesting, clever parallels and metaphors that kids could understand. I mean, the one thing about Thomas, it's never really been a show to talk down to kids until, you know, years later. But so that's really the essence of this rant. And like I said, this is an unedited, you know, just my thoughts on the situation. You know, just the thoughts on me as a character. I wish that she had been treated better, because, you know, she could have been better representation in the show. But I feel bad that the show also felt the need that they had to, like, go out of the way and put her on this pedestal and made this whole marketing campaign about bringing in this character and then only to do nothing with her. It almost feels like the writers in the show really didn't want to, but they did it because, you know, oh, well, the higher-ups need it. So it's like, okay, we're going to do the bare minimum and we'll slap it all over marketing, and then people will think we're, you know, hitting our quota. I don't know. It comes off as lazy and cheap to me. So with that, this is Train King James signing off. I will see you guys around. Please, if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, comment below. Obviously, I respect any and all takes here. Let's all just try to keep the comment section civil. You know, We don't need to be going after the crew. We don't need to be going after any voice actors or anything like that. We don't need to do anything of that kind. We're just having a conversation about why a character didn't work. And I could have very similar conversations about other characters in this show on why they didn't work. Anyways, see you around, guys, and have a nice day.